it is great to have Ronnie and Ashley Brown with us. And this almost didn't happen, though, as of like Friday night. I was coaching baseball. I was coaching third base at the time, yelling at kids, you know, doing the thing you do as a coach. And my phone started ringing, and it rings to my watch also. So I glanced at my watch. And I was like, Ashley's calling me. And so in between innings, I went and told Nikki, I was like, hey, Ashley's calling me. I don't know why she's calling me on a Friday night at 9 o'clock, but, you know, give her a call. And I guess you went down to drop off some supplies, folks affected by the hurricane, and got stuck, right?
Yeah, so I've got some friends that are living in Fort Myers, and reached out to them after the storm and just let them know if they needed anything to let me know, and I'd do what I could. You know, on some level, you know, just the right thing, you know, offer help, you know. But then they actually said, yeah, we need some help. So yeah, we loaded up 110 gallons of gas and 30 cases of water and some food, and I headed down Friday morning. I left Chipley at about 5:30, and it's only supposed to be a 6.5 hour drive, but it ended up taking me about 10 hours to actually get down there. And then the plan was to just drop the supplies off and then turn around and drive back to Chipley, because my wife Ashley is pregnant with our first child, and we had a 20-week anatomy scan scheduled for 2 o'clock yesterday in Tallahassee. So my plan was to make it back yesterday for that scan, but the Lord had,
which He did not.
I did not. I failed completely at that, but yeah, so we dropped the supplies, or I dropped the supplies off, and then got back on 75, and you know, 4 hours later, I had made it about 10 miles up the road, and then it just came to a complete standstill, and they had shut down I-75 in both directions, about a mile in front of me, because the whole interstate had flooded over. So I ended up having to turn around and go back to Fort Myers and stay the night, and then, you know, came up with a new route yesterday morning and left and got back around 5 o'clock yesterday.
Yeah, so Friday night, Ronnie's like, you might want to let David know.
Yeah, because I thought I was pretty sure that this was like the whole service, and I was like, well, I don't want to jam him up. At least give him time to prepare something, you know, if he needs to preach on Sunday. But yeah, we made it back.
Here we are.
Yeah, I appreciate that, by the way. Yeah, because if it had been Sunday morning, like, oh, by the way, we're not going to be there, it would have been like, all right, right now we've been like, well, we're dismissed. Y'all have a great day. Because since I wasn't preaching a message today, I was like, all right, so it's going to be a little lighter week. This is nice. Got a lot going on in other areas, so I'm not going to prepare a Sunday morning message because this is taken care of. We're going to have this. And then when I got that call, I was like, okay, so I'm going to be preparing a Sunday morning message now. So, you know, I started working on it yesterday, but, you know, I do appreciate that heads up. And the Lord gave me something, and we'll have that next Sunday. But, yeah, so, well, I'm glad you did get to make it. I'm glad that you did get off of that bridge, off I-75. But what I want us to do, because I mentioned this in recent weeks at some point, I don't know, when the guys that used to go over to old school men's meeting, a lot of times the guys that would speak at that, they didn't get up and preach a sermon. They shared their story. And there's a number of guys, whether it's the guy that got his arm half eaten off by a bear in Alaska as he was out hunting, whether it was a guy who was, you know, hustling people in the pool hall until God got a hold of him. Like, you just hear these stories, and a lot of times we connect with people's stories on just a different kind of level. We hear, you know, we may have our own idea and be like, I could never because, or God could never use me because, or I'm too this or that for God to use. And then we hear someone else's story and we say, that's a lot like my story. And look what God's doing for them, or look what God's doing in them and through them. And so this morning, it's not going to be, I mean, I'm going to share a few verses at the end, but it's not going to be a traditional sermon style service where I'm going to preach, you know, for 45 minutes. We're going to share, or they're going to share their story. They're going to share the story of New Story. So, you know, I'll ask some questions and all, but we want to hear from them. And this is something I hope to do, maybe not even in this setting, but in some setting, have different ministries in. I mean, we've heard from Promises of God multiple times, and their ministry, and there's others that I'd like to have in and be able to hear kind of the heart behind what they're doing and what God's doing in their lives. So with that being said, again, rather than just me talk, I will let y'all talk, because that is, I mean, I can just keep talking. So to start us off, before we even get to New Story, let us meet Ronny and Ashley. And quick little side note, the way I first met them was Ashley and I were working for the same company, same software company. We started working together, it was November 30th of 2 years ago, so 2020. That's my first day. So we started working, so I've known Ashley almost 2 years. Then about 2 months later, a group of us had gotten together in Chipley, and so I met Ronny at that time. So that's kind of how we first met. And so I would hear her talking about, when we'd have meetings or whatever, someone would ask her, how are things at New Story? And I didn't know what that was. And so, I got to ask them. We've gotten to hang out a number of times and gotten to know more of the background. But I want them to tell a story. So first, though, tell us a bit about you guys. Like, how did you end up here? How did you end up heading up New Story? How did you end up in Chipley? Like, before you even get to New Story, like, you.
Those are questions I still ask myself, David, every day.
How did I end up doing this? Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that question, David. I'm glad you asked it.
Yeah. So tell us, your background, growing up, where are you guys from? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start, because we're very, very different, Ashley and I, as far as just the our upbringing and that kind of thing. But it's cool how God kind of brings different people from different walks together and just uses it to create something beautiful. But I'm from a small town at the southern end of Lake Okeechobee called Pahokee. I was born and raised there, and was born into a less than functional family. I guess that would be a polite way to say it. There was addiction on both sides of my family. Grew up going to church. It was kind of nice. I was telling Ashley, it's kind of nice, having the hymnal out again. I bounced around. My mom was she had a drinking problem, so she would drink for a while, and then we'd go to church. She'd sober up, and we'd go to church for a while, but then she'd start drinking again. Then she'd sober up, but then we'd have to go to a different church because she was too embarrassed to go back to the church we were going to. So I grew up going to Lutheran churches, Pentecostal churches, Methodist, Baptist. I was baptized at a Methodist church. I was an alcoholic. Had the robe on and lighting the candles in the morning, and all that, and sleeping in the pews during the sermon. And but yeah, so kind of grew up in that kind of dysfunctional environment, but was exposed to the church. It's kind of nice having that pressure of finding the hymn before the piano starts playing, and I'm still looking for the right page number. So that was kind of nostalgic, trying to hurry up and find the right hymn. But yeah, so I grew up, and my parents loved me the best they knew how. But they were the type of parents that would openly say things like, "We're just staying together until you and your sister graduate high school." So that was kind of the environment that I grew up in. A lot of violence, more or less, a lot of verbal abuse between my parents. They ended up getting arrested in front of my sister and I. They got in a fight one morning while we were getting ready for school and ended up going to jail. They got divorced shortly after that. They didn't quite make it till we graduated high school. So, but that was kind of like a turning point in my life. Up to that point, I was very good student, all A's. Played all sports: basketball, baseball, football, cross country, golf. I was very athletic. But when my parents got divorced, my life kind of took a different direction. And I would say I fell in with the wrong crowd, but I was looking for the wrong crowd. I was looking for some acceptance and love, and I found it in the wrong places. And that was around the age of 15, 16. And, I won't spend a whole lot of time on that, but it was, the next 13 years of my life was just a path of destruction and drug use and, just in and out of jail and rehabs and mental institutions and, suicide attempts and just a mess. I hurt everyone that loved me. I was very selfish. I didn't care about anybody else. All that I cared about was seeking pleasure and an escape in whatever way I could find it. And if it meant hurting you or taking something that you had to get it, then that was the most important thing in my life, was feeling, not necessarily feeling good, but not having to be in reality at all. That was my goal every day, was to escape in some kind of way. And I was fairly good at it, for a long time. But that's it's not a very sustainable way of life. And it got really bad. I was, like I said, I don't want to be too graphic, but it was, yes, sir.
I don't really have anywhere higher we can go. I mean, we could stand.
I could sit a little more straight.
We'll stand.
All right.
No, great. Now he's going to pace. Now you started. Now he can walk.
That's how I was telling him. I was like, we were talking on the way over here. I was like, I kind of hope we're sitting down, since it's kind of an interview. But I speak better if I'm moving around. But then that's going to be weird if he asks me a question and then I'm kind of doing one of these. But yeah. So where was I? What was I saying? Destruction. Yeah. Destruction. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, fun years. But yeah. So I got to a point where I was an IV drug user, and things were just really bad. My mom was in addiction. My dad was always there. He wasn't perfect, but he was always there, and he continued trying to help me. To the point it was just complete enabling. He was my source of money mostly, but he got to a point where he couldn't put up with it anymore, and I found myself homeless. He was paying for my apartment. I found myself homeless, and I wasn't good at that. I wasn't good at sleeping on the ground, so that kind of motivated me to find another program to go to, and. That was my first experience with a faith-based program. Was in 2012, a program in LaBelle called Cross Training Ministries, and that was like that was a shock to the system. I only made it to that place for 7 weeks, and talked my dad talked him into taking me home. Immediately started using again. He had a heart attack about 3 weeks after I left that program. He was an electrical contractor. I was at work with him. He had a heart attack, and he went to the hospital, and they found a mass in his stomach. So he went from the hospital to West Palm Beach and was in the ICU. And I took that as an opportunity. I had his keys to his apartment, his work van, and instead of going to the hospital, I went to his apartment and sold all of his TVs and sold all the tools off of his van, and and continued serving myself. So of course, my family found out what I was doing, and my dad told me that whenever he got out of the hospital that he couldn't have me in his life anymore. The stress that I was putting him under was literally killing him. So found myself reaching out to another friend and ended up at a program in North Carolina. That was a year long. And I actually stayed there. A week into that program, found out that the mass was pancreatic cancer. So, it was another faith-based program, and I would say that that was where I received salvation, I guess. I let the person, repeat after me, and the sinner's prayer, as some people call it. But at the end of that, I added a little silent, condition. It was a conditional agreement with me and God that I was going to do this. I was going to give it a chance, but He was going to spare my dad. And obviously, that didn't happen. He died about 10 months later, and I stayed at that place, and things got better. I was clean for the most part. I was still sneaking around, smoking cigarettes, and using tobacco. I wasn't committed to what I was doing. I was still looking for ways to escape reality. And he passed away in April of 2013. And God didn't honor His side of the agreement, so I'm taking back control of my life completely. And it wasn't 3 months before I had completely destroyed everything again. and now on top of that, my dad was dead. So I didn't really have any family. My sister didn't want anything to do with me, and I was about to be homeless in North Carolina, which again, I'm not good at being homeless. I like climate control and a bed. So I, again, found myself at another program, and this one was in Okeechobee, a place called Dunklin. Dunklin Memorial Camp is what it was called. Now it's called Dunklin Memorial Church. But that's where the Lord really got a hold of me. I realized that, man, if I keep going this direction in my life, I didn't think that I was going to be somebody that like overdosed and died. In my mind, I saw a picture of myself living till I was 70 years old. Just being strung out on drugs and alone. That's the future that I saw for myself, was living a long time like this. So I didn't really have any other options. So I ended up, begrudgingly staying there, and things started to change. I can't really say that there was like some great, burning bush moment for me. It was more so just staying put and being obedient and submitting to other people in my life to make decisions for me for a long time. And that long time ended up looking like 5.5 years. I stayed put and really let the Lord transform my heart in a pretty radical way. I can't really imagine myself being more different than I am, or than I was today. I wonder. I go around my sister, and at this point, we'll kind of laugh at the crazy things I used to do, and it sounds like I'm talking about somebody else. Whenever I share my testimony, it seems so foreign compared to the man that I am today, and I'm really grateful for that. But God definitely He transformed my heart. It wasn't all at once. I was very angry for a long time, and very rebellious in a lot of ways. But just dealing with that little by little, over the years, it just I couldn't be more grateful for. I met Ashley while I was at that ministry. Like she's about to share her life, and it's very different. And sometimes I was like, man, when we met on Christian Mingle, and I'm like, man, you're interested in me. I just told you my story, and man, so what's wrong with you? It's like some red flags. You're looking. Oh, I look like a catch to you. Okay, I don't have a car. I make about $12,000 a year, and I live at a place that's full of men, and they're all in recovery. And that's, you want to? Okay, yeah, come on. But yes,
there's somebody for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as far as how did we end up in Chipley? So yeah, I was at that ministry for 5.5 years. I was a staff member there, so I went through the program, went through a year of servant leadership training, and then I went through a year of staff training, and then there was a staff position available for me, so stayed there. So then I was a teacher and a supervisor at the job site, and there was a roofing company that sent some of their employees to the program, and the owner of that company would come visit some of his employees on the weekends, and Ashley and I ended up developing a relationship with him and his wife. Hurricane Michael came through, as some of you guys might have heard of in this area, and he wanted to open a permanent branch up here, and was considering me as the person to go up and manage it. Again, more red flags. I had never been on a roof before, and so that should have made me question his business decisions. Looking at me as a general manager of a roofing company, but a lot of fleeces went out. Ashley had some medical issues, and the ministry that we were at provided health insurance, so that was a big deal. And but a lot of fleeces to the Lord went out, and every one of them got answered, to the point where I was left with the question of if I wasn't gonna step out, it was because I was afraid that I couldn't stay sober outside of a program. And I answered that question with a no. I'm not afraid. I do believe that I can do this. So we stepped out. We came up here I came up in February of 2019, and Ashley joined me in the middle of March, and we've been up here ever since.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's Ronnie's story. Now,
Yeah.
Ashley, tell us about you.
Well, a little bit different story than Ronnie's. Grew up in North Carolina. Had two parents that absolutely loved my brother and I. I mean, we were raised in a really great home. My dad was the greatest example to me of what like my Heavenly Father's love for me. I could experience that because I had an earthly father that loved me very well and consistently pointed us to Jesus. I grew up around church, grew up, seeking Jesus, and my brother actually ended up going through addiction. My brother was about 14, maybe 13 or 14, and he started using drugs, which was like very confusing because we grew up in the same home. I'm like, I don't understand this. But he started using drugs, and he put my family through a lot. So kind of what Ronny did to his family, I was on the receiving end with my brother. And so when I was in college, I went to Liberty University, have a degree in youth ministry, and
I got kicked out of high school.
You have a degree now, though. I was at Liberty University, and I remember my brother got arrested. It wasn't the first time he had been arrested, but it was like really bad that this time he was arrested. He was facing a lot of years in prison, and I remember I was just in a different type of fantasy. Like Ronny tried to escape reality, with drugs. I tried to escape reality by like just not trying to live in it. So I would not go to sleep at night because I was like, man, I'm scared that if I wake up in the morning, I'm going to find out that my brother didn't make it through the night. And so I just won't sleep. I just won't go to bed. If I don't go to bed, then I don't have to wake up to that phone call. And so it was a different type of kind of fantasy that I lived in, and I would listen to my parents cry themselves to sleep at night and try and figure out, man, what did we do wrong, and why is this happening? It was in the midst of that with my brother that I really felt like the Lord was putting on my heart that one day I would have a ministry, or my family, God was preparing us to be able to have a ministry to help other families who had loved ones that were walking through addiction. And I was like, I don't really want this, Lord. Like, this hurts. I'm not really interested in helping others. So my life is, it's looked different. I spent a year overseas on the mission field, went to 11 different countries. While Ronny was going to Dunklin and getting clean, I was overseas for a year and getting to share Jesus. Those Operation Christmas shoe boxes, guys, I've been to those countries. Like, I've seen where those have had huge impact in the lives of children, and so, school supplies were coming out of those boxes. They were opening up those boxes, like, as we were in, different countries. So, I spent a year overseas doing that, and my life has just been a crazy adventure. I've had a lot of sickness in my life. So I've spent years of my life bedbound and in a wheelchair. Lyme disease has just caused a lot of pain and suffering. But it's things that looking back on, wouldn't choose I wouldn't choose anything different, because in those seasons, I have experienced Jesus like I had never experienced him before. I experienced just closeness with the Lord that I don't believe I would have experienced had I not have been, fully bedbound and not able to do anything. So in 2014, after coming home from spending a year on the mission field, I relapsed with Lyme disease. I had been in remission, and I relapsed with Lyme. I was on staff at a very large church, I think you mentioned, First Baptist of Woodstock, up in just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So I worked with the student ministry there, and loved what I did, and was engaged to another man, not Ronny. And I relapsed with Lyme disease, and my world kind of got shaken all upside down. I went from like this life full of all of these things that I was like, man, I have so much purpose. Like there's all these things that I'm doing for the Lord, to I was fully bedbound again, and I had to move home with my parents, and they were having to take care of me, like fully take care of me. And so I felt like a burden. My fiance kind of walked out, so that he kind of walked out, and the health issues I was facing were kind of more than he was wanting to bargain for. And so I felt like a burden for a long time, and the Lord was kind of ministering to my heart in that. And hey, you're not a burden. There's somebody that's actually going to cherish you, like, and you have gifts and you have skills to offer despite this. And so there's a ministry in North Carolina that came out of the ministry that Ronny had been on staff at, called Living Free Ministries, and they were mentors of mine. And so I went to the Christy Doss. She's her and her husband are the founders of Living Free. She came and picked me up one day, and she said, hey, like, I know that you really don't have any energy, you can't really do anything, but I'm going to take you and we're going to get a pedicure. And I was like, okay. So we went and we got a pedicure, and we were sitting there, and I was like, hey, Christy, I was like very nervous. I was like, I think I'm gonna put a profile up on Christian Mingle. What do you think about that? And she was like, you should do it. She was like, lots of men at Dunklin meet their wives online. And I was like, I don't want a Dunklin man. That's not what I'm looking for. So lo and behold, like 6 months later, here comes Ronny walking into my life, or clicking into my life on Christian Mingle. And he is a Dunklin man, and he is on staff at Dunklin. So yeah, we met, we had a long distance relationship, and then we got married, and I moved to South Florida with him, and we lived at Dunklin for 2 years, like he said. Yeah, so coming to Chipley is just out of obedience to the Lord, like, you know, just saying yes to what the Lord, all of life, right, is about saying yes to the Lord. He writes amazing stories, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we always, you know, we say in so many different ways, you know, whatever God says, do it. I mean, that's, Bobby talked about that last Sunday night. Bobby surrendered to preach earlier this year.
Yeah.
And he said as he was wrestling with it, I preached on Jesus' miracle, the wedding of Cana of Galilee. Yeah. And I didn't realize I did this, but pretty much like the whole service, I said like 400 times, whatever Jesus says, do it. Yeah. And I just kept repeating it. And Bobby's over there wrestling with, should I do this? And he's like, okay, I got it, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's always best to say yes to Jesus, you know, and you never know where it's going to lead you. It might lead you to Chipley, Florida. It might lead you to North Carolina, or, you know, a lot of times folks are, you know, the joke whenever I was growing up in youth group was always, if we follow where Jesus says, he'll send us to Africa. But yet I've known people that have said yes to Jesus and went to Africa, and they've been happier than they've ever been serving Jesus in Africa. So wherever God leads you, he'll equip you, and following him and being in his will, be the happiest you've ever been.
Yep.
Now, so that's y'all's stories. Yeah. All right. And let me just say this too. You wouldn't know this by seeing Ashley right now. She talked about youth ministry. One of the things, like when I first met Ashley, she had, it was pink or purple hair. I forget exactly. It pinkish
was one
purple.
Of those, yeah.
But working with youth, she would dye her hair different colors. So even my kids, when they met her, and I was talking about coworkers, and like, Ashley, is she the one with purple hair? I'm like, yeah, that's the one. That's Ashley. So you couldn't tell that now, but you know, she's had a few colors like that.
I might be a hairdresser. That is also in my.
That's in the story too.
Yeah.
All right. So now we have kind of their story, and honestly, it's two stories from two people that could be anybody. Your coworker, you, your family member. Two stories. So that's their story. But now there's this new story. There's this ministry called New Story. Now, if you were to summarize, give us the one paragraph. What is New Story Ministries?
Can we answer that?
Ashley's better at answering that question than I am.
We are a transitional discipleship home for men that are coming out of recovery programs or potentially out of jail in the right setting. Now I have a disclaimer. Where we desire to help men live a story worth retelling through gospel-centered Christian community. So we want to come alongside of men, and we want to give them the opportunities to choose to walk this out with Jesus, but we also want to display to them what it can look like to walk with a life walking with Jesus. So right. We're home. Yeah.
I would add to that, just for the for the purpose of showing them that life can be about more than just not doing drugs. Because that was the most transformative thing for me when I realized, man, I'm not living my life to just not get high anymore. That God has birthed a purpose in my heart and set me on this different course where not getting high is just a byproduct of the life that I'm living. It's not the goal. You know, it's just part of it now. It's like it's not something that I have to like really actively work at and let me just get through this day without battling some urge to use some substance. Like that comes through being in community with like-minded people, with other believers. Like that's what did it for me, was developing relationships and building a life that was worth more to me. Like I finally, for the first time in my life, had something that I didn't want to lose, that was worth more to me than just serving myself. So I think that's the important part to display to not just the guys in the house, but just to the church at large. It's just, man, this is about so much more than just avoiding sin or just checking a box. You know, it's like it's what we were created for. We were created to be in community with each other, and that's what we want to model to these guys and everyone in our lives.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the kind of I don't know, slogan. I don't know if that's the right word. Whatever it is, helping men live a story worth retelling. You know, a new story, because before Christ, we all had a story. We all had who we were, what we did, and some of our stories of coming to Christ were at a young age. Some were later in life after we'd been through so many things. But we want all people to have a story that's worth retelling, that new story after Christ. And so I love that. Whenever I first saw that, I was like, that is so cool. And so I've worn the T-shirt before. I've got that on the T-shirt. You know, I got the hat. I buy their merch. You know, it's awesome. Yeah. I should have had y'all come set up a merch table today, but now, okay, so this is what New Story is, and these are your stories. But how did New Story even come to exist? Because I mean, that's a pretty big step from, I came to Chipley because the roofing guy wanted me to supervise, his office here. We had come through, so different paths and stuff. We came to Chipley, which it's bigger than Gaskin. I mean, they have like a Walmart and they have some.
To lovingly refer to it as the armpit of Florida. People are like, "Oh, you're from Florida?" I'm like, "But the armpit." Like,
yeah. So that's it's not major city. Let's just say that compared to us, it's bigger, but it's not a major city. So you're moved up there. How does New Story Ministries come to exist from this move in Chipley? How does that happen?
Yeah. So I would say Ashley's gonna she can give a more concise answer to this question as well. But I will say it was scary, because I was working in full-time ministry. Felt like I was really making a difference in people's lives. It was my job, but it was what I did all day long. I got to work with guys that came from where I came from and got to really see God move and change their lives like He had changed my life. So to just walk away from that to work a 9-to-5 job, it was never 9 to 5. It was never 9 to 5, but you know what I mean. Like just to work a job, like I was leaving ministry to, what I was wrestling with was to pursue money. Basically, I was leaving ministry to work a job that was going to pay me well, and we were just trusting that. There was going to be ministry there. I did believe that God wasn't opening this door for me to just go work a job and pay bills until I died. My life had become something that was full of purpose, and I trusted that this was the next step in that. I just hung on to that scripture that said, He's a light to my path and a lamp unto my feet. Whenever I really look at that scripture, it's like when I think of a light to my path and a lamp to my feet, I can just see what's right in front of me. I can just see that next step. I can't see, what's at the door over there, if I'm just looking at my next step. So I just trusted that if I was willing to take this next step, that the purpose in the ministry was going to be there. But yeah, it wasn't at first though. It was the most difficult thing that I had certainly ever done. I mean, like I say, I had never owned a home before. We bought our first house. I didn't even really know how to set up, electric. My dad had done all that for me. I didn't know how to pay bills. I didn't know how to budget money.
We failed to realize that we would need a lawnmower because we bought a yard
I had
with
to buy
an
a lawnmower. I had to
acre
mow
of
my own grass all of a sudden and make sure that my trash can was taken out to the road, and
because at Dunklin they did all of those things for you.
Yeah, and what else was I about to say?
How did a new story come about?
Oh yeah. So it was a really difficult time.
As he said, Ashley could tell us more concisely. Now he's telling it. So.
Yeah, no. I'm about to hand it. But yeah, so it was like it was a big learning curve. So I came from a place where I thought I had it together. I thought I had dealt with a lot. But I hadn't dealt with the world yet. Not really, not like that, not like. Just getting blindsided. And at the time, I was a full-time student. I had never been to Chipley before, so it was like a lot of big firsts, a lot of really stressful situations that I found myself in, and just navigating through them, and in the midst of that, making good decisions. Not letting the stress that I was going through derail me. We were very intentional and got involved in a church and developed that community that we had at Dunklin. We developed it and even more. We really developed some good relationships. So then just realizing that, okay, man, I've transitioned out of full-time ministry and I've been successful at it. And then seeing so many people that I had developed relationships with and helped with at the ministry not be able to do that. I think that's where the kind of the spark for New Story came about, and I'll let her tell the Cincinnati story, I guess.
Okay, so we got to go back just a little bit to when we were at Dunklin. So before we moved up here, Dunklin men go through the program, and then there are men that will stay on for an additional year of training, and so it's called servant leadership training. It's a hard year for them, and so we became.
Yeah, you are a servant, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, and so it's a whole new level of servant leadership. But those guys were our friends when we were at Dunklin. So Ronny had been single at Dunklin, and then we got married, and like his friends had been the guys that were single and in SLT, and so I just kind of came alongside of that. And so we had a tiny little house at Dunklin, and I love to entertain. We'd have the guys over, so sometimes we'd have like 16 men in our tiny little house, and we'd eat dinner together, and then we'd watch a sermon, and we began having conversations with them about like, hey, there's life outside of this place. I knew there was life outside of that place because I had been outside of that place before, and I had lived a very, productive life outside of that place. And so, hey, there's life outside of here, and like, God's put dreams in your heart. And so we just start having these conversations with them, and we began to see these guys that were our friends like get a picture of what it was that maybe God was calling them to, and what maybe it is that they could go and actually do out in the world. And we would see them, leave, and we saw some of them leave very well and transition very well, and we saw some of them not. And so yeah, we move up here to Chipley, and Ronny had put a roof on this really big house, and we knew it was for sale, and so we were just curious, like, what is that house selling for in Chipley? And so
not like we were going to buy it.
Just total curiosity. Yeah. And so I pulled up Zillow one night, and I'm like looking for this house, and I find the house, and like right below the house is what is now New Story, but it was.
It was not $800,000.
No, it was like, very cheap. And I'm like, hey, look, there's this house on Martin Luther King Drive, and we are looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really have any walls, but like, think of the potential, Ronny. And so we went to go look at it, and we thought, well, we're just going to buy an investment property. We're going to buy this property, and we're going to, we'll make some money off of it. And so we went to look at the property, got there, toured it, and then Ronny and I went to.
I was not interested.
Ronny and I went to a marriage conference up in Cincinnati, like that weekend, I think it was, and it was the Bethkeys. I don't know if you guys know the Bethkeys, but they have a whole thing called family teams, and they're just all about living your life through like 1,000-year perspective or lens. And so really thinking about what is your legacy. Like, you're not just living for yourself right now, like you're leaving a legacy in everything that you do. And so what do you want that legacy to be? And we didn't have children, and children weren't really on the horizon at that moment. And so we're there, and we're like, how do we apply any of this to ourselves? As we were kind of going through, and there was a guy that we loved. He had been in SLT at Dunklin, and he had left early. He had made some poor decisions, and he had left early, but we really had a heart for him. And he called Ronny while we were in Cincinnati, and he was in a really bad spot. And like, we're walking around, you know, supposed to be talking about this marriage thing, and Ronny's on the phone with him, and Ronny's like, I think this might be it. Like, I think he might be getting ready to end his life. And he's like, I can't get off the phone with him. And so that kind of, like, God used that to kind of begin to just birth in our heart. We started thinking about this house that we had just gone to look at, that we wanted to invest in, you know, out of selfish desire, like, let's make money. And the Lord said, I want you to buy that house, and I want you to help. His name is Stuart, and he said, I want you to help Stewarts. And so we were like, okay, what does that mean? That kind of changes everything. And so we came home, and we called the real estate agent, and we said, hey, can we look at this house again? And there were these guys that we had been friends with, you know, at Dunklin, and they were in our minds, those guys that had stepped out to transition, and they got out, and they didn't have any support, and they didn't know that. You know, it's a really great thing. God has totally changed and transformed your life, but then you step out into the world, and the world doesn't understand the transformation that has happened. And if you don't have a support system around you, like, the reality of being successful in that can be, you know, very, very difficult. And so we called the real estate agent. We went back to look at this house that was, like, falling apart in more ways than we understood at that moment. And we told him, we said, hey, we total, like, game changer. We want to buy this house. We want to put men in it. And we want to help men that are coming out of, like, recovery programs or out of jail. And so we wrote an offer on the house, and it was like one of those things that we're like, okay, Lord, you're calling us to this. We'll put our yes on the table, but we also know that this isn't going to work. And so we wrote a very...
No way it was going to work.
Yeah. We're like, but we'll be obedient, because our yes is on the table, Lord, you know, because it's not going to work. And so we wrote an offer that asked that the couple that owned it, owner finance it at, like, a really stupid low interest rate. We took what little life savings we had at that point, and said, here's what we have as a down payment, and we want you to owner finance it at this, you know, really low interest rate. And so we sent that to them. They countered, and then I think we countered with them. So that we wrote the offer on, like, a Friday. On Sunday, we had a signed contract. And on Friday of that week, we closed on that house, and we sat and looked at each other, and we're like, oh, no, what do we do now? This is bad. Like, we did not plan for this to work out. And so we had no money, because we had put our life savings into purchasing this property, and it had no walls. And so we were like, well, how is this going to work? But we put out on Facebook and just said, hey, like, this is crazy. Like, we get things that we do sound crazy to people. Ronny going to Cape Coral this weekend was crazy to a lot of people. And it's just, you just do what the Lord says to do, and that's crazy to a lot of people. And so we put out, we're like, hey, this is crazy. We know we just moved here, but we bought a second house, and it has no walls, and we want to help men, and this is what we want to do, but yeah, pray for us, you know, and that's about all we had. And out of that, somebody reached out. They called us that weekend, and they said, hey, we want to hear about what you're wanting to do. We said, okay. So we're like, we don't really know. Like, this is just kind of the thought that the Lord gave us. And in that phone call, they said, well, we know that you're not going to have the money to get this house finished. It's clearly has no walls. And we're like, yeah, that's right. We don't have the money. And they said, well, we want to loan you the money personally. And just tell us how much you need. We'll loan you the money personally. And then you're going to get a 501c3. And we're like, we are? What is that? We're like, okay. They're like, you're going to get a 501c3. And when the house is finished, and, like, we've loaned you all the money and the time is right, you have your 501c3. We're going to donate to the 501c3 so that the 501c3 can buy this house from you guys, and then you'll pay us back out of that money that we donated to the ministry. And we're like, wait, this isn't going to cost us like anything. Like, you want to just give us all of this money. And sure enough, that's what happened. So it took us about 18 months. We were very ambitious. We're like, we'll get this house knocked out in 3 months. 3 months, new story. We didn't know it was a new story at that time, but we're like, new story is going to be up and running. We'll be taking men. 18 months later, as the Lord worked on our hearts and did a lot of transformation within us, we welcomed our first man. So,
because that was it 2019?
2019, we bought that. November 2019, we bought the house. Yep.
Yeah. And then
March 2021, we moved our first man in the house.
Yeah.
All right. So that's obviously, I mean, there's a lot to that. This is a whirlwind. Now, something that you said that I really liked, we put our yes on the table. Yes, Lord, we'll do it. Okay, but it's not going to work, so we're not worried about it. Like, you ever be there like, okay, God, I hear you. I'll totally do that. It's never going to happen. God's not going to. God can work some stuff out. Like, if you say yes, God, he's like, I heard the yes, that's what I'm taking. And I'll work out all those other details. All the craziness, I can take care of that, which y'all have seen.
Yeah.
Now, because I know people are going to get hungry, and we could go all
I'm getting hungry, David.
She's even hungry. All right, so tell me this. New story now, the house, you got the house 3 years ago, but you moved your first guy in 18 months ago or so. Okay. All right, so in a year and a half, there have been highs, there have been lows.
There's been a lot of lows.
Okay. Tell us, all right, so because we say yes to God, that means all of our problems are gone. We say yes to God, that means everything's good, right? Y'all know I don't preach that. I've said the complete opposite plenty of times. I mean, Jesus said, just as a for instance, if you love me, follow me, the world's not going to like you. We look at the lives of the disciples. If following Jesus means everything's good, then the disciples, everything should have been great. Except 11 of the 12, died horrific deaths. So obviously just saying yes doesn't mean everything's good. So let's be real. There have been some lows, but there's been some highs. So just share something, share some highs, share some lows with us. Something, I don't know, top of mind, whatever's the first thing you're like, hey, this is like the high, or this is the low, whatever you want to share.
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with that, and we apparently haven't had nearly enough faith for that particular theology type as far as things just going nice and smooth and everything.
I like to think
place.
that we identify with Christ through our suffering, and so I'm like, yes, Lord, I'm identifying with you right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely co-heir with Christ in the suffering of this ministry for sure. But there have been highs, but there have been a lot of lows, but in the lows, that's where God has really showed up for us and really cemented the fact that, okay, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Just with support that we've been able to raise. You guys included. My goal for the first year was to raise $1,000 in monthly reoccurring support, because we only had one guy in the house, but we had a lot of bills, so we were out of pocket, personally, for just some of the normal, everyday, light bill, water bill, getting groceries for guys in the house, that kind of thing. Like we were out of pocket, So that was my goal. It took about, it took a little over a year to reach that $1,000 a month goal, but. I'd say the biggest standout, like as far as from a low but also a high, would be back in March or April of this year. March of this year, we saw a decent sized crack in the ceiling of the living room in the house, and we were pretty confident that something bad was going on.
We tried to ignore it for a while.
We did. We tried to. I especially. I'm not even gonna think about that. But then it started going down the wall, and it was.
And then we tried not to think about that.
Yeah. There was a couple months of not thinking about that. But ended up, needing to get Ducky Johnson over there to assess what was going on underneath the house. And we ended up having about 12 feet of the main support beam that ran down the middle of the house was completely rotted out and had dropped about 4 inches. And they were telling us that if we didn't fix it, the whole front of the house was eventually going to just kind of break off. And I was like, well, is that bad? Is that
how long are we talking?
Yeah, how long do we have? Because I know it already doesn't sound cheap because they're talking about putting jacks underneath the whole front of the house and lifting the whole thing up. And I was like, oh my goodness, like we don't have any money for that. But yeah, so that needed to happen, and it was going to be about $13,000. And
we did not have
$13,000. But it was, it had to be done. And around that same time, we had the house full for the first time. We had 4 guys in the house.
We were so excited.
Yeah,
we're like, house is full. We're like sharing with everybody.
Yeah, we've got 4 beds. And up to that point, we had really only been able to keep about 2 guys in the house. But at that time, we had all the beds full, and we were, it was going in a good direction. And then this happens with the house 11. I'm like, oh, why? Why is this things are finally going good? And so then we got that estimate for the repairs. And I think it was the same week we found out that all 4 guys in the house were using. They had all been sneaking around, and they were all getting high. So I, being the optimist that I am, was like, okay, cool. This is my opportunity to just bail on this whole thing, and I'm out. Like this obviously wasn't from the Lord, or the house wouldn't literally be falling apart and figuratively be falling apart. So cool. I get to quit now. Like this is great. I get to not deal with any of this anymore. But then Ashley is very, very different as far as her outlook, and she's very good at fundraising. That's definitely a gift that she's been given. And she put out a post on Facebook, just kind of communicating what was going on, what the need was specifically, and the house was pretty much empty. We ended up having to part ways with 3 of those guys. One of them went to detox and ended up staying in the house. But while all this was going on, the house was empty, and we're raising all this money to fix the house that nobody's living in at that time. But we ended up raising, I think, over twice what we needed.
Well, yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, you got these are the numbers. Yeah.
So we needed 13,000 and whatever for the floor, and like 3 weeks before this, we had a board meeting, and we met with the board, and we were just talking through like the mortgage on the house, and like it balloons at whatever date, we were kind of talking through some of those things, and Ronny and I had told the board, hey, like we're gonna just start praying that the Lord would provide for this mortgage, because we don't know what we're going to do otherwise. Like, he'll provide when this balloons. That was a conversation we had with like the 4 of them in that room. We had not had that conversation with anybody else. It wasn't something that we were like communicating. In the midst of we're raising money for this, we got $15,000 that came in designated towards the mortgage from like random people that like and we're like we need to fix the floor, and they're like, yeah, I know, but the Lord's put it on my heart. I'm supposed to give to your mortgage, and I'm like, okay. And so that for us, like in that, like the Lord's faithfulness, and like how it's not always just all about money, but how He provides in that here we had a request that we were making known before the Lord, but we weren't openly sharing. And He provided, like in the midst of also raising this money that we needed, and we received all of the money that we needed for the floors. We brought in this extra money that we were able to put towards the mortgage, and so it just blew our minds, and it was just how the Lord just continues to, remind us of His faithfulness, but also the call that He has like put on us, and that He is going to take care and He is going to provide.
Yeah, I would agree. It's not. In this example, it's financial, but like the way I look at it is I was in a really low place as far as even wanting to do this anymore, and looking at this as an excuse to quit, which I think it happens a lot in ministry. I'm sure you probably don't want to do this all the time.
Every Monday.
Exactly.
It's not because I don't love y'all, but seriously, pastors, Mondays are hard on pastors, and so every Monday it's kind of like, God, is this what you've called me to?
Yeah, exactly. So like in that lowest spot where I thought
we were literally like at the beach, and like we went to just get away, and we were sitting at the beach, and we're like, do we quit? Like, we'll call the board right now, emergency board meeting. We don't want to do this anymore.
I was like, yeah, we need to call an emergency board meeting and vote for the immediate dissolution of Story Ministries. And that's where I was at. Like, this is done.
We were hurt because we had loved these guys we loved them, and we wanted them to make the right decisions, and it wasn't about like us, but it was about them and their lives and their families, and and so we knew that it was like, man, we want them to grab hold of like what it is that God is offering them, but they're choosing not to do that, and so it just hurt. Like, it hurt.
Again, very common in ministry. It's like you're gonna get let down, you're gonna get hurt, but it's like that. It can't stop you from pursuing the calling that God's placed on your heart. It's like I know the fruit that comes from just giving up and quitting and just isolating myself from people. That way I don't have to feel that pain of betrayal and just that hurt of you wanting something for someone else more than they want it for themselves. I know the fruit that comes from that, but I know the fruit that comes from fighting that urge to quit and really pushing through and doing what God's called you to do. It's like, so I choose that over the quitting.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'd say that was a big high and low for us. Just God showing up in a really low point in.
One of the guys, just off the top of the mind, we were talking today about like highs, and we were kind of reflecting through, like, I think one of your questions said success, and we're like, well,
victory.
Yeah, like, how do you measure that exactly, David? Like, what are you looking for there? But there are things, like, we've seen guys who have gone on to not make great decisions, but we got to take a gentleman. He was 46 years old, and we took him to get his driver's license for the first time ever in his life, and like the joy that was over him, and like the just sense of accomplishment that he had, that he was able to get something that he never thought he'd be able to attain. And
he had to take his driving test and everything.
Yeah, it was like a 16-year-old getting their driver's license, and then seeing men being able to cultivate and rebuild relationship with their children, like that we had a guy that got out of jail. He had been in jail for like a year and a half, and it was like he got dropped off, and he was, hey, can his daughter had just turned 2, and he had like not been in the picture hardly at all. And he said, can they bring my daughter over? And like getting to see him, like see her for the first time, like, there are those moments that were like super joyous, and seeing men just make good decisions for maybe the first time ever in their life, and learning how to grocery shop. Sometimes, like, not all of them, some of them. Yeah. James and Daniel, y'all know how to grocery shop. But there were men that didn't. They haven't known how to grocery shop. They don't know how to cook. They don't know how to, like, budgeting. Budgeting's a big thing. Like, debt can keep you in a really bad place, And so there have been those, like, wins throughout. And then there have been those lows of seeing guys relapse and having to walk through that.
Even those that went on to make bad decisions, I think one of the great things is that you had planted a seed.
Yeah.
You had planted a seed while they were with you, and that's something even when we talk to the guys over at Promises of God Recovery. There's a lot of people have come through that ministry, and while they're there, they've heard the gospel, and that's been planted. So even if they go on to make bad decisions, that gospel, that seed has still been planted. And I remember y'all telling us a story almost a year ago. You're talking about just some of those things you're able to be involved in with different guys. And there was a guy that got to call his mom. Hadn't talked to his mom in a while.
Yeah.
I think she was overseas even or something like that.
Cost us like way too much money for a phone call, but.
But just being able to be a part of that, and him say, hey, Mom, I'm with these folks, and they care, and just even some of that for, you're ministering to the guys that are in the house, but by extension, you're ministering to families that are all over the place, and so I just think that's great. Yeah. Now, so that's your highs and lows. Real quick, share with us, again, because this is awesome, and honestly, we could just sit here and talk for the next 2 hours, but people are going to
I will be hungry.
Yeah, I know, you're going to be hungry.
Yeah.
So, as we kind of start to wrap this up, what is the, long term, right now, what is the long-term vision? Like you say, hey, what God's birthed in our hearts for now, and God could always change it tomorrow, but what we think right now, long-term for New Story, what is your vision for that?
Yeah, so I would say that at this point we've got 3 guys in the house right now, 4 beds, but what I'm running into now is people are getting ready to finish programs, and okay, I don't know that we're going to have a bed when you're ready to come back home. So that's kind of where my gears are turning now, is trying to figure out, or at least plan for, additional housing. We don't really know what that looks like. We still don't have any money, but so but the gears are turning, and I see the Lord moving in that. It's like, to the point where, okay, or we at the beginning we would just take in anybody just to have the bed, but now we're like, okay, we can really focus in on, we're trying to disciple guys, so we want to work with guys that want to be discipled. So it's looking like, okay, we're now in a spot where we can say no to someone, but I don't want to say no to somebody if they really want help, if they're from this area, they got family, but they don't want to be back on mom's couch. We don't want to have to turn someone away. So that's kind of short term and long term. We're starting to plan to try to figure out what does that look like for additional housing.
Yeah, we would love to see multiple houses, new story houses, and we would love to see men that have come out of programs, and okay, they move into the house, and then maybe there's an opportunity, there's a house that everybody has their own room, or and there's an opportunity for that, and then for them to disciple the other house, and so because it's all about opportunity, right? That's ultimately what we were talking about, success. It's we are providing opportunity, and God is a God of opportunity. But yeah, our heart would be that there would be discipleship between the different houses. And so, we might be able to take those guys that we would right now have to say no to, but then the men that have a little bit more experience and they're able to be involved and to be an encouragement and to pour into and invest into those other men. So awesome. That, and hopefully somebody to come along to help in another just a support leadership position. So
right. Absolutely. Now, so obviously, kind of last question for y'all would be, how can we specifically pray for you? And obviously, there's that desire to see it expand. So that's obviously a prayer request. Obviously, I would say we need to, pray for those that do come into the ministry. There have been those that have come in and have gone, and continue to pray for them. Is there something else that you would say, please pray for us for this?
Yeah, I would say definitely just pray for the right guys to come in our path. I do believe that God is sovereign, and the people that are in the house are exactly who's supposed to be in the house right now. But definitely, I have a picture in my mind of the perfect candidate for who's coming in the house.
Ronny would have everybody sitting around singing Kumbaya,
I realize
nightly.
I've been naive about that. I enjoy talking about the Bible. I enjoy doing devotions and Bible studies and stuff like that. But I remember what I was like whenever I was single, a year clean, that kind of thing. And I might just kind of want to watch movies and maybe hopefully get a girlfriend, that was more on my mind then. But so I definitely pray for the right group of guys, and protection over the house. But also I think what Ashley was saying, guys being able to invest in other people. I think the real goal of discipleship is to be effective at discipleship. We have to reproduce ourselves, because right now it's just me and Ashley. I teach class twice a week. It's pretty much just us as far as directing this ship. And I suck a lot of times. I don't always talk the right way. I don't always interpret situations the way that they should. James caught a little bit of that last night as I was very sleep deprived and a little irritable. So that's my prayer too, is that not only would we get the right guys in the house, but we would get someone that shares that vision, that wants to be even more involved. So basically praying for help for me, someone that has that desire to teach and to really invest in guys' lives. And in that, an even more specific prayer is my goal for this coming year is to start raising support to have some kind of compensation, like a monthly
for someone
compensation
to come join us.
for someone that might be coming out of staff training position at a ministry that is looking to step out, but and wants to be involved in ministry, but they've got bills, they've got, that kind of thing. So I think that would open some doors for us as far as maybe being more attractive to some of these ministries that I'm partnered with, that get someone that's a little more trained up, would be able to, offer them, okay, well, hey, I can give you $500 a month, something like that is where our thoughts are going. Don't know if that's the right thing or not, but just trying to figure it out. It's like, well, maybe that'll work if we've got some kind of compensation to offer somebody that's coming out of training, that might help. But yeah, so those would be some specific prayers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, then, definitely we'll commit to praying for you guys, and I'm going to let y'all go ahead and sit down.
Okay.
And I appreciate this, so thank you guys. So let's tell them we appreciate them. Here, I'll take it. Thank you. No, I'm so appreciative because it's great hearing that story. Like I said, all of us have a story, and it's great to be able to tell that story. And sometimes, every now and then, I'll ask this. I'll just be chatting with someone. So, what's your story? Just ask someone that every now and then, because what you'll find a lot of times, not everybody, but a lot of times, people will tell you about themselves. And actually, that's also a good, just in case you ever need this, it's also a good deflection thing. If someone's asked you an uncomfortable question, you can redirect and ask them about themselves. And now they don't even want to know what they asked you because they want to talk about themselves. But it is good to talk about other people and find out their story. I want to share two verses that came to mind as I was thinking about this morning. So I'm not preaching. I'm giving you two verses, and then we'll pray. But two verses that came to mind this week. One was Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. In Isaiah 6, this is when Isaiah had his vision of the Lord, and you read about the seraphims, and they were crying out, "Holy, holy, holy." And in Isaiah 6, verse 8, we read this. Isaiah said, "Also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" That's a big question. God's saying, I need somebody. There is a need somewhere. Who could I send? And if the verse ended right there, we would all just kind of be saying, well, I wonder if he ever found anybody. I wonder what happened. I wonder how that turned out. That's tough that God needed somebody. But we don't have to wonder, because Isaiah finished the verse and he said, "Then said I, here am I, send me." God's saying, is there anybody out there I can use? And Isaiah's like raising his hand like, ooh, pick me. I'll do it. God, you can use me. And as you listen to the story of New Story, and you listen to Ronny and Ashley's story, and you hear two different lives, different backgrounds, different geographical, spiritual backgrounds, how God brought them together, used them, now they're impacting other people's lives. Yeah, listen, God at some point called and said, hey, who can I send? Who will start New Story? Ronny and Ashley said, you know what, we'll do it. They put their yes on the table. Doesn't mean it's always been easy. They put their yes on the table, and there's been times like, hey God, could I get that yes back? There's that feeling, but God has worked through them, and He's planted seeds through them in guys' lives. Just like, again, like we've seen with Promises of God and other recovery ministries and other types of ministries. But God's calling. Who's answering? I mentioned Bobby, and I'll pick on Bobby again. A few months back, Bobby heard God calling, saying, hey, I need a preacher. Bobby at the time was 38 years old. He's like, not me. I'm a 38-year-old business owner. I'm good. Then he was like, deep down, just in our conversation, kind of like, obviously he's not. I misheard something. But as he submitted, and God said, no, I need somebody. Who can I send? And Bobby's like, okay, if it's really you, if you really want me, I'll do it. God's still calling people. It's just not as many people are answering. He's still saying, who can I send? There's one other verse I'll share with you. Ezekiel 22:30. God said this, again God, He said, and I sought for a man among them that should make up the hedge and stand in the gap before me for the land, that I should not destroy it. Again, God's looking for somebody. In that particular setting, He's looking, He's like, I just need somebody who will step up and who will go before me for the people and stand in that gap and make up the hedge. I need somebody who will step up. Who will do it? In Isaiah said, here am I, send me. In Ezekiel, the way that verse says, but I found none. And I feel like that's what's happening a lot of times today. God's calling, God's searching, God's putting out the request. Who will go? And then we all just sit quietly. And then we pray and we dismiss and we go eat and we go about our lives. God's calling. who will answer. And so I wanted to hear from New Story Ministries. I wanted you to get, kind of the heart behind that, get the story behind the New Story Ministries, and just understand, hey, God can call anybody from anywhere at any time, but we have to answer. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for the call that you put out there for people to serve you. Thank you that you are still calling people, and you will use anybody. Lord, if people will just answer and they'll surrender to that call. So Lord, I pray, it might be that you're working on someone's heart today. Maybe there's somebody with us today you've been speaking to, and they've been thinking, I'm obviously wrong about this. Obviously, I got my wires crossed. I heard something wrong. That's not God. That's something else. God, I pray that they would recognize your voice and recognize your call. And rather than be in that situation where you said, hey, I need somebody, and nobody responded, may it be you're seeking for somebody and you're saying, who can I send? Maybe there's someone here today who'll say, okay, I surrender, Lord. It's me. I'm here for you. So, Lord, please use the stories that we've heard today, the testimonies we've heard today, and speak to hearts. And have your will and way in each life. In Jesus' name, amen.